Hello again. Here we are at my YouTube channel, Nancy Hart Battaglia, talking about my upcoming book, Blame It on the Full Moon. And welcome today. It's nice to be with all of you again. So today I was trying to think, there's so many subjects to cover. It's hard to know which one to do next. So I thought I would talk about the paths we take in life, the road of life. I know Jack Frost writes about it and talks about the road less taken and how most people go on the busy road and the other road is sitting there waiting for someone to come along. And I know we all have choices in life, and there are times when we have decisions to make and we're trying to figure out what is the best life or the life you really want. I started out thinking I was going to be a music major. I had studied classical piano from the time I was about 5 years old until I was almost 17 when we moved to California. I had studied the violin and played in the Kansas City, Kansas All-City Orchestra one year, and I was in the high school orchestra. So music was my love, my passion, and where I thought I wanted my life to be. My teachers at the time thought I would probably go to Juilliard or Curtis. I mean, I was playing Rachmaninoff, Beethoven, Bach, you name it. I loved it. But fate had something else in store for me. And right before my senior year, that summer, my father got transferred. He was a commissioned officer in the U.S. Public Health Service, and he got transferred to, of all places, California, miles away from where I'd grown up for 13 years of Kansas City, Missouri, which I loved. And I was not a happy camper, needless to say, to be right before my senior year and all the activities and senior prom at the end and all, and I'm not going to be there for it. So it was extremely disappointing. My sister and I both went kicking and screaming to California. We did not see this as the land of opportunity for us. And my father promised he would take us to Hawaii in return, but he never did. I've been to Hawaii many times, but on my own, not thanks to my father. So off we go to California, and I end up at Hillsdale High, which was a new high school that year. We were the first graduating class. It was the second year they were in existence, but they had moved freshmen, sophomores, and juniors over from other high schools in the area. So at least I was in on kind of the new beginning, and everything, all the tight cliques hadn't been quite formed and all by the time I got there. And I really enjoyed Hillsdale. I've stayed in touch with them as much as my Kansas City friends. I've gone to all of their reunions, and it changed my life in a number of ways. But my counselor, my advisor, whatever, I guess called either one, was a woman who knew about Mills College. I had never heard of Mills College. Other people in Kansas City had, because ironically, a girl I went to grade school in Kansas City, Judy Robinson, ends up at Mills too, which is very unusual because Mills only had 650 women at the time. And for two of us who not only had a Kansas City background, but both at the same elementary school, Border Star. That was pretty remarkable. So it had an excellent reputation for music. Darius Milhaud was there, who was a famous French composer and musician. In fact, while Mills was a women's college, men could go to the graduate school there, and Darius Milhaud had such an excellent reputation that Dave Brubeck went there and studied under him because of his, he had different ways of timing and syncopation, and that's what sent Brubeck down the path of the type of jazz he played. And also, I just found out recently, Burt Bacharach studied with Milhaud, but he studied with Milhaud in New York, not at Mills College. And I met Burt Bacharach when I worked at CNN, and we interviewed him. And I would have talked to him about Darius Milhaud had I known that, but without computers back then to find out more about people's personal lives, I did not have that piece of information. I did read his poem, though, and he left me a nice thank you note for that. But anyway, back to college. So my counselor said, you should go to Mills College. It has one of the best music reputations around, and it would be a great place for you to study music. Mills was very competitive. It was hard to get in there. So I had to keep my grades up, but I did get selected to go to Mills College. and there I am for the first 2 years of college. It's a 4-year school, but I had some health challenges. I had the mumps, and it went into spinal meningitis, so I missed a couple of weeks. They made Mother Day take me off campus because it was so contagious. And then I got some kind of a virus the end of my sophomore year that killed over 120 people. I think it was a strep or a staph infection, but a lot of people were dying. And I spent a week in the hospital with that and had to take all of my finals that summer. So, yeah, this was not a good way to start college. And I was worn out after, and I'd had my wisdom teeth taken out one Christmas during that. I mean, a lot had happened to me physically. And I told my father and my mother, I can't go on. I need a break. I need to take some time off, because in the meantime, while I loved my language classes and most of my professors and Charles Lawson and American government and what have you, the head of the music department, her name was Miss Lyons. I think it was Ruth Lyons. For some reason, took a dislike to me almost from day one, which I have no idea. Well, I was a very shy, quiet person in those days. You didn't hear, I talk now and people think, oh, Nancy's been talking all her life. Well, I've been talking all my life, but I didn't talk much in high school or college, either one. I was pretty shy and quiet most of the time. And so she gave me a D, like David. I was shocked. And I go in to see her and I said, Miss Lyons, Dr. Lyons, well, here are my papers and my exams. I've got an A or a B on everything. Why did you give me a D? And she said, because you never speak up in class. I said, but I always answer, and I'm usually right when you ask me. She said, but you don't volunteer it, and you don't speak up enough. And I was really upset over that. I mean, this is my major. And I realized there was no point in staying 2 more years with this woman head of that department. I was never going to do well in music at Mills College. So I stopped, and my father says, well, you're not going to sit home and do nothing. You're going to get a job. And the only job I had up to that point, other than babysitting in Kansas City for 30 and 35 cents an hour, kids, that went a lot farther back then. It won't go anywhere now. It probably won't pay your tax on your hamburger at McDonald's. But anyway, and then one of those Christmases when I was not having my impacted wisdom teeth removed, I worked at See's Candy and started a lifelong love with See's Candy, which is basically available in California. Now you can get it in the Phoenix area and maybe a few other places, but it's basically a California. You have to be in California to get that candy, which is wonderful. So I don't know what I'm going to do. Here I am, I'm 19. I have no job experience, no college degree, 2 years under the belt of college, and that's it. And while I'm pondering that, my mother, who I think was an angel on this planet, sent to save me, guide me, encourage me, whatever. But she was such a major factor in my life. And if anybody could be considered perfect, it would be my mother. So she happened to see an article in the newspaper, an ad asking for people to apply to be a library assistant at the San Mateo Public Library. Well, I never would have thought of doing that because I didn't know how to use a library. And you say, how can you have gone through high school and 2 years of college and not know how to use a library? My father would pick up books for me at the library on his way home when I was in high school. And in college, I was very good at filing nails and giving manicures and painting people's nails. So I would trade, barter. I would say, I'll do your nails if you'll go find these books for me I need at the library. And they would help me out. So here I am applying for a job in a business I don't even know how to use myself. And about somewhere around 35 to 40 people applied for it, teachers and all people with all kinds of background. And I thought, I'm never going to get this job. And you had about a 4-hour exam to take. They gave you fines that were due in different books and lengths of time, and you had to figure that out. And they gave you the Dewey Decimal System to put in order. Well, luckily I was okay in math, so I could figure out, which decimal point was bigger than which other one. So I couldn't do that. And then they had a vocabulary quiz. They had an author. They would name authors. You had to say what they wrote, or they would give you book titles, and you'd say who wrote that. And then they had a section on problem solving. If you're standing there at the desk helping a patron, and a very angry patron pushes that one aside, demanding your attention and a problem to be solved, how did you handle it? Well, I'm 19. I've never handled anything like that. But I figured it out. I mean, I wrote what I thought. To my surprise, I was one of the 3 finalists for this job. Like, oh my word, I did it on that test. And then the 3 of us had to go be interviewed by city personnel and the head of the library. So my knees were quaking. I go for the interview, and I came out in the top 2. So then we had to be interviewed by the head of the library, and I got the job. Well, I loved it. I did it for 2.5 years, whatever. I really enjoyed being a librarian, and I decided I wanted to go back and get a degree so I could be a professional librarian. So I decide on the University of Kentucky. In those days, to be a librarian, it required having a knowledge of 2 foreign languages, a working knowledge, speak, read, and write. I'd had 2 years of French in high school, a year of French in college at Mills, 2 years of German at Mills, 2 years of Latin in high school. And I took a year of Russian in night school while I'm working. So I had some language skills, and decided that I would get a degree in French. Kentucky had a very good language department. People in California think California is the only place to ever live. And it back then it was a beautiful state with a lot to offer. But people would say, why are you going to Kentucky? My answer was, well, I love horses, I love bluegrass, and I love basketball. And Kentucky had one of the top basketball teams in the country, lots of bluegrass around Lexington, and beautiful racehorses everywhere. So that was my answer. I never mentioned the language department to them. So I go back to Kentucky and end up getting my degree in French. And then your decisions will have such an impact on your life in ways that you do not even know. Little did I know that 2 years at Mills was going to get me a job at CNN 20 years later. That was 59 when I left, and in 79, I am doing a part-time job to help a friend out. So I had said I'd fill in for something, and I ended up staying for the whole summer, and that's another story for another episode. But I'm there helping. I'm working at the Paces, which was like the top condominium place and they rented places out, or they sold them in Atlanta in those days. We're talking 1979. And that's where the corporate CEOs would stay while their house was being remodeled, or a new person in town for a job or something. It was a very upscale place. And I loved working there, and I loved the people. And, well, I'll tell you how I ended up there. Because it's an interesting story. My sister was a single mother, and she was a legal secretary, but she would babysit to get extra money for him. And she kept him in private schools a lot here in Atlanta. So she had made friends with one of these women she sat for. And unfortunately, the woman had a tragic accident where her house burned down and her 3 children in it. And she was crushed. I mean, I don't know how you could really even want to go on living after that, but somehow she did. And she divorced her husband, who had been home supposedly watching the children, and she moved to the Paces. And she and my sister were friends, and they used to give parties there. Where she meets a man who wants her to go to Lake Lanier, and she was working at the Paces as a leasing consultant to kind of keep her mind off things and have something to do. And they said, you can't go with this weekend unless you can find a replacement. Well, think how strange this is. So my sister calls me and says, Barbara wants to go to the lake with this man. They really have hit it off, but she has to have somebody fill in for her. So I go down on Friday. They show me the area. They give me the keys. I have the keys to every apartment there. I've got the master keys and all. They tell me what forms have to be filled out. And They said if you need help, the maintenance man is on duty, and the maintenance man might have an answer if you get stuck with something. And they leave me, a total stranger whom they know nothing about, and I have no background in it. The only thing I ever leased was my own apartment in New York, and then when I moved to Atlanta, that was as much as I knew about leasing anything. But I said I'll do the job and help Barbara. Well, Barbara and the man had such a good weekend that on Monday she resigned. They were going to get married, and she was going off to a new wonderful life. And they said, would you stay till we can get somebody? They had, I think it was 3 full-time people at that time who worked in that office. And I said, sure. Well, I had gone from a very good paying job at the library where I had been for 16 years until this happened. I'd gone from a very good paying job to part-time at $4 an hour. And this was in 79, and no health benefits, no vacation, no nothing. But the deal was, I would do it if they would let me be off. I knew I wanted to go to Dallas for the American Library Association convention to see a lot of my library friends from around the country. And the deal was, if I want off, you have to let me go. So they said, okay. So here I am working at the Paces, leasing apartments right and left. I never knew I was going to be good at that. And getting bonuses from their headquarters, which was in Chicago. And then in the fall, I started thinking, I've been here, well, this was May when I started helping. So May, June, July, August, September. It's time to start getting back to a real life and something more than $4 with no insurance or security or retirement, whatever. And I hire a woman who had worked for me when I was head of the Sandy Springs Library in Atlanta. And she wanted a change in her life. And I'm showing her how to fill out the forms. This is in November of 79. And a man comes in, and I'm helping her, and I happen to see the name Ted Turner on his application. And I said, I was going to come talk to Ted Turner about an idea I had for a TV program that might be of interest. And he said, I'm setting up a new network for him. Are you interested in coming to work for me? Well, he didn't put it like that at first. He said, do you have a resume? The only time I ever had a resume in my car was that day. It was 3 pages, not the one that they tell you should have, 1 page or 1 or 2 at most. 3 pages, mostly library stuff and some community things. But he looked at it and he saw Mills College, the place where I've gone thanks to being yanked away from California to California my senior year. And he had been head of all of the CBS TV stations in California. Mills had an excellent reputation in those days. I mean, in my dorm, the year ahead of me, but in our dorm was Ingrid Bergman's daughter, Jenny Lindstrom. Shane Kashek's granddaughter was there. James Cagney's daughter was there. A lot of celebrities had daughters or granddaughters there. And I had an excellent, it was called the Smith of the West Coast. It was, Smith, Vassar, Wellesley. Well, Mills was the Smith of the West Coast. That's how good its reputation was. So Sam, when he saw that, said, I know if you went to Mills, you have to be smart, you have a good vocabulary, what have you. Would you come be my personal assistant? And I just said yes, right there on the spot. I didn't say, what's the salary? I didn't ask anything. I just said yes, which was how I got to Atlanta, and that's another story too. So he said, well, I can't hire you till the 2nd or 3rd of January, right after the holidays, but I'm going to count on it. He called me 3 times between then and January 2nd or 3rd to make sure I was coming to work for him. And I said, I get there are 2,200 resumes on file. All people with great TV. Oprah Winfrey had sent one in, Forrest Sawyer, and they couldn't even get an interview. And I get hired with no TV background. My life has been full of synchronicity like that. It's full of unplanned and the unexpected. But and also the management company for the Paces owned another complex right across the street, a very gorgeous high-rise. There are two towers in it, and it's one of the posh, classy places even today to live in Atlanta. All the big lawyers moved in there and all. And they offered me at 50% more than I made as a librarian if I would be the resident manager and give me a condo to live in. And I said, well, I have a husband and a house. I don't need a condo. And I thought about it for about 30 seconds, and I thought, no, that is not my path. That's not what I meant to do. There's something else coming. And within a few weeks, here comes Sam Zellman, and I'm at CNN, which I loved. If you've gone to my YouTube channel under Nancy Hart Battaglia, you will have seen, which you must be, or you wouldn't be seeing this. You will see my interview with Burt Reynolds. I got the only interview he did in Atlanta when he premiered his Sharky's Machine here, and I was so proud of that. So that this is a little part of what I'm putting in my book, how you have to be willing to try new things. I knew nothing about television, but because it was new and they were doing a new venture and all, they were hiring all these young video journalists just out of school and seasoned veteran anchors and reporters and all. They had a big mix, but they were training a lot of people. And so I got to take training on how to edit and how to run cameras and all sorts of stuff, which came in very handy when I did some interviews of my own. And I loved my 2.5 years at CNN. I worked for Take Two, a show with five guests a day. So that was 25 a week, and I pre-interviewed them and helped give possible questions to the anchors, Don Farmer and Chris Curl. And there was some more synchronicity. I've met several hundred people in life who have a connection to me somehow. Chris Curl and I are both Delta Gamma sorority sisters. Don Farmer was from St. Louis, and the first boy I ever kissed, who was a neighbor who lived a year ahead of me, he was in Kansas City. He was a junior when I was a sophomore, and he asked me to go to a drive-in movie, and he gave me a kiss. That was the only first kiss I had had, and the only one at that time. So how ironic that he and Don Farmer are Fiji fraternity brothers at the University of Missouri and know each other quite well, of course, and they were the same age. And I thought, how could this happen? But anyway, they talk about the road not taken. I took the roads that opened up for me. I was offered roads like that all through my life. Of the 10, I've had, I guess, about 12 jobs. I only applied for the first 2. That one at the library and my first job with the New York Public Library when I left library school. So most of the jobs I had, like this one, I did not even know existed. Well, it didn't. They were just putting it together. Only Sam knew that he had a job there waiting for me. And I made quick decisions. I didn't hesitate. I didn't go like, well, I have to think about it. And well, let's see. This one offers that. This one offers that. This pays more, but this has other benefits or something. I didn't do any of that. Within seconds, for all of these things that came to me, I was saying yes, except for the one I said no to. And that's for another episode. So anyway, I just wanted to get you thinking some about your own lives and how you've gotten to where you are and what the path was on, and are you doing what you want to do? It's never too late to change. If I went from a career as a librarian, which I had for 16 years, that paid well. I was in charge of branches in 3 different situations, the big branches. My last one, we had a total counting part-time of 34 people on the staff at Sandy Springs. But I left job security because I needed a new challenge. And I wanted to do something different. And I had talked about television. I had friends who were in television, and they said, Nancy, you have no background. You'll never get a job in television. And anyway, you have to sleep with people to get ahead, and that's not you. You're not going to do that. So forget television. One of these was Gloria Lane, who was the first woman anchor in television in Atlanta, and Don Stewart, who had been an anchor and a weatherman and all. And they're both discouraging me. And I end up at CNN for 2.5 years until I left. And that's a story for another day. Thank you for being here. Before I go, I have to tell you, my passions in life are music, travel, cats, rings. I love you. You see, every day I will have different rings. Rings and earrings I love, and dancing and music, and hats and shoes. Those are my passions in life. Imelda Marcus has nothing on me. Thank you for being with me today. I hope you've enjoyed this. And there will be a lot more in the book. I'm just giving you little blips here and there, a little taste of what there is. So thank you, and I hope you're having a wonderful July. Bye.